Hello, welcome back to Endemic Times. Congress just passed over $858 billion in the most recent military spending bill. This is different from the $1.7 trillion spending bill that was passed to keep the government going, in addition to having more provisions for military expenditures, most notably Ukraine. Yeah, there's an endless coffer of money for Ukraine, but when it comes to things like the child tax credit, the homelessness crisis, inflation, our current and impending worsening recession, the housing crisis, and so much more, we don't have money for those things. Well, let's take a look at the particulars of this military spending bill. Remember to subscribe, hit that like button, and hit me up in the comments below and let me know what you think about all of this. Now let's get into it. The national security budget has increased 10% from last year's $778 billion bill. It passed in the House with 350 votes in favor and 80 against. Included in this bill are some specific provisions and criteria. One area of note that is leaving some Democrats and environmentalists worried is the expediting of oil and gas projects, a 2-year deadline for the most detailed category of review required by the National Environmental Policy Act, and gives the applicants the power to ask a judge to step in if an agency misses a deadline, which would provide a judicial decision quicker than filing a lawsuit. The worry here is that by speeding up oil and gas projects, it could risk damaging ecosystems and compromise the health of nearby residents. In another hit for environmentalists, Manchin proposed a shorter window for environmental groups to file lawsuits challenging energy projects. This unfortunately takes away power from advocates and would limit their ability to have more oversight and give them less time to find lawyers, raise funds, and file lawsuits. To be expected. It's another finger to those that are trying to keep the little bit of safeguards that we have in place, but are being thwarted by the likes of Manchin. This bill increases the Pentagon's budget by 8%. It also provides a 4.6% pay raise for American troops. A very notable element of this bill is the language that rescinds the Pentagon's requirement that troops take the COVID vaccine. Republicans actually threatened to tank the entire military bill if it wasn't included. I wish that the progressive squad would take some note of the many times that Republicans use their power where and when they can to actually do something. You might not agree with this specific change that is being made, and I get that. I just wish that the squad would actually do this, and the fact that they continue to not really just exposes them as the frauds they are. Sorry, not sorry. Also, $800 million is going to funding Ukraine and a new defense program for Taiwan, which was authorized up to $10 billion over the next 5 years. Military aid for Kyiv is expected to pass later this year, and the administration asked lawmakers to approve an additional $38 billion for Ukraine. Some other areas of note in this bill is the shielding from public personal information of federal judges and their families, including things like social security and license plate numbers, addresses, schools, and places of employment. The reasoning behind this provision comes on the heels of the judge that lost her son last year to an active shooter that came to her home. That was an absolute travesty, and I can see why, if that is the whole reason for this, why this is being done. But we also know that this is tied to them not wanting protesters, regardless of being nonviolent or not, from disrupting them. With these kinds of things, it's always easy to put on the face of it the look that this is for security and safety, but as you go down the line, we all know what this is. Keep the plebes away so the elites can play. When it comes to active duty families, this bill makes it easier for families to qualify for basic needs stipend, which helps to target the housing and insecurity for the most at-risk members. Nearly 1 in 4 active service members experienced food insecurity in 2020. There are also sweeping changes aimed at reducing risks to civilians in U.S. military operations, with $25 million going to fund the staffing and other expenses of making those necessary changes. When it comes to actual military operations, this bill requires greater specificity regarding the geographic location of strikes resulting in civilian casualties. It also gives the authority to access approved funding to make condolence payments for civilians and their families inadvertently injured or killed in the U.S. military operations. 0 payments were made in 2020. One of the most notable aspects of this military bill and other subsequent bills that have been passed is the excessive amount of military aid that is going to Ukraine. Ukraine has become the top recipient of U.S. foreign aid. It's the first time that a European country has held that that top spot since the Truman administration. As of December, the Biden administration has provided or agreed to provide Ukraine with a long list of defense capabilities, including armored vehicles, anti-aircraft missiles, coastal defense ships, and advanced surveillance and radar systems. As we can see here, back when the amount of spending was at $48 billion, $9.9 billion went to humanitarian aid, $15.1 billion to budgetary support, and a total of $22.9 billion to the military. The biggest concern that doesn't seem to be getting discussed as much as it should be is just how much the Ukraine war and endless money and arms that we are sending is draining the US, both monetarily and militarily. Here is a quick look at the arsenal that has been provided to Ukraine. This is a staggering amount that is pulling from our own supply. It's one of those things that when politicians are talking about the fears of China and Russia as these scary, crazy superpowers, if they truly believe that, then why would they be willing to spend and deplete our own resources? You know how planned obsolescence is worked into so many technical products and almost everything else these days? Well, it kind of feels like planned defeat when it comes to the US and all politicians being willing to spend and spend and spend and send weapons and arsenal overseas while talking out of the other side of their mouth saying that we need to prepare for China and Russia. Make it make sense. Ukraine is just such a bad idea and a big FU from all political parties and politicians. I mean, if we're sending this much money to one nation, but we aren't able to do things here in the US that are the same amount of money, if not a hell of a lot less, I mean, look at how much money the US is spending compared to other nations. And many of these nations have nationalized healthcare for their citizens. Are you mad too? I lose both faith in our system and any hopes of real reform because too many of the people that proclaim to be on the outside and willing to make change just get absorbed by the system and carry on like all other politicians in the past. This system is so corrupt, and they are lying to us when they say we can't take care of schools and free lunch programs and the child tax credit, mental health services, Medicare for all, the homelessness crisis, inflation, the recession. It does not have to be this way. Well, thank you so much for watching and listening to me rant about Ukraine and all of the crazy spending that we're doing, because I just can't believe that we're in this place. What do you think about all of this? Let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to hit that like button or dislike button, subscribe, share with your friends, and as always, remember to stay safe, take care, and be kind to each other.